안녕하세요.
The biting cold of the Seoul night was nothing compared to the whirlwind of emotions inside Hai-jin. Sitting on a bench in the park, she gripped the old keychain between her fingers, feeling its cold metal against her warm skin. Kang Min sat beside her, but neither of them spoke. They both knew that this moment would change their lives forever. I don't know what to do, Kang Min, she finally said, breaking the silence that surrounded them. Part of me wants to believe in you, but the other part still feels scared. He took a deep breath before speaking, choosing each word carefully. I understand, Hai-jin. I know I can't change the past, but I can choose how to move forward from here. I should never have left without explaining. I was wrong. What are you going to do now? If you can't forgive me, I'll accept that. She turned her face to look at Kang Min. His gaze was sincere, free of the arrogance he once carried. There was only vulnerability now. If it's a goodbye, Hai-jin smiled faintly, but it was a sad smile. I wish things had been different, Kang Min. But I think some stories just aren't meant to continue than any words. He lowered his head, accepting her words. As much as it hurt, he knew it was the truth. I hope you find happiness, Hai-jin. If it's a goodbye, she nodded, holding the keychain one last time before placing it in his hands. Keep this. Maybe it's better to remember that, for a while, something real existed between us. Kang Min closed his fingers around the keychain and watched her stand up. But she knew some without looking back. Hai-jin walked away, disappearing into the city lights. She gave one last look at a new beginning before leaving. Hai-jin sighed, feeling the doubts fighting against her emotions. He remained there for long minutes, forget what happened, holding the envelope. Maybe we can start over. To open it slowly. When he finally did, Kang Min's eyes lit up with hope. That's all I want. What matters is that you're willing to try. Himself to question. She smiled, whether the path this time, he chose a real smile. He remained have to prove that you've changed. Emptiness of the space and I won't make it easy for you. Solitude. He chuckled softly. Now, I wouldn't expect anything less from you. The city of Seoul never slept, and the offices of SJ Corporation reflected this reality. She looked up at him. At the top of one of the most imposing skyscrapers, Seo-jun found himself in his office, reviewing reports with the precision of a man who allowed no room for error. For him, perfection was the only acceptable form of work. His gaze cut through the sheets of paper as though he could decipher everything just by the strength of his mind. Mr. Seo, the communications director is on the line. Would you like to speak with him? His assistant asked, hesitating. He didn't lift his eyes from the papers. If it's about the image crisis, send an email. Then you won't. I don't have time for excuses. She took a small step. The assistant nodded and left, leaving Seo-jun in his calculated world. But the tranquility was shattered when the office door suddenly swung open. I'm sorry, Mr. Seo. She came in without permission. The assistant tried to intervene, but her voice faltered in the air. Outside, a woman appeared with a defiant and determined look. Seo-jun recognized that face immediately, but he couldn't hide his shock. His eyes narrowed as he watched her, recalling memories he thought were buried. On the 25th floor of an imposing building. So this is how you handle crises? Hiding in your glass tower? Her voice was firm, without a trace of hesitation. Seo-jun leaned back in his chair, studying her with a cold, just like every decision he made. I didn't know my company hired amateur journalists to give lectures on management. Nari's eyes sparkled with a mixture of challenge and anger. I'm not here to lecture. I'm here because you need me. The secretary's controlled tone didn't. The silence hung in the air. Seo-jun raised an eyebrow, a tablet, intrigued. This is interesting. Her eyes were sharp. But Nari crossed her arms, as if preparing for a confrontation. The silence between them lasted. Your image is in ruins. But it felt you can keep pretending you don't care. But the investors before the end of the solution? A documentary that shows a human side of you. I'm the producer. You'll have to deal with me. Seo-jun let out a brief laugh, but his eyes scrutinized Nari, as if evaluating an opponent. And what if I don't want to? Tension between them. Nari leaned slightly over the table. The proximity between them making the air tense. Then, in less than a month, your company could face an irreversible credibility decline. He leaned back in his chair. He remained silent, watching her as she tapping his fingers on the glass table. Seo-jun was a man of numbers, statistics, and probabilities, and he knew his Nari was firm. Let's say I agree. What exactly will your role be? Nari smiled faintly. I'll be by your side every day, documenting your routines, every interaction, every decision. but not
The world
her.
will see
You know
who
who
you
I am,
really
right?
are.
He asked, testing
Seo
her.
Jun
She
reclined in
looked
his
at him
chair,
with confidence.
studying Nari.
I know
The
you're
game
a
was
demanding
set,
CEO,
and he didn't like
relentless,
losing.
and you
All
like
right,
to
Nari,
test your employees.
but let
to
me
the
make
limit.
one thing clear.
But I also know
If
that
you
you're a man
think
who
you can
built an
turn me
empire
into
on
a
your own,
kind and
and every
compassionate man
decision
in front
you
of the
make is
cameras,
calculated.
you're mistaken.
The silence
I'm
filled
not
the
that
space
kind of
between them.
person.
Do
She held his
didn't
gaze,
expect that answer.
unwavering.
A slight glimmer
What if I
of
told
interest
you I'm
crossed
not
his
here
eyes,
to change you,
but he
Sejun?
quickly masked it.
I'm here to reveal
I
the
hope you're
truth,
prepared for what's
whatever it
coming
may
next.
be.
You
The air grew heavy.
She
But
raised
there
an
were no
eyebrow,
more words,
tilting her head
just a
slightly.
silence laden with
I'm
unspoken
always prepared,
challenges.
Mr. Do-hyun.
The film
He
crew
let out a
was
small
already
laugh
set
through
up
his
when
nose.
Seo Jun entered the
Closing
meeting
one of the
room.
reports on the
He
desk
surveyed
and
the
standing
faces
slowly.
around him with a cold
With his
gaze,
hands in the pockets of
not
his suit
hiding
jacket,
his displeasure
he
with the
walked toward
entire
the large
situation.
window that offered a view
Sitting
of
at
the
the
city.
center of the table,
Everyone
he crossed
says
his
that,
arms
but
and
few
drummed his
prove it.
fingers against the polished
Yoon-ji
wood.
tightened her fingers
Let's get this
around
over
the
with.
tablet,
I have
maintaining
accompanied
her
her.
impeccable posture.
His sharp voice echoed
Perhaps
throughout
because
the
you've
room.
never given them the chance
Nari
to prove
across the table
Do-hyun
kept a
turned
neutral
to face her.
expression as
A
she
mix of
organized the
surprise and
documents in front of
challenge in
her.
his eyes.
Her gaze
The
met
sun had
his for a
barely
brief
risen on the
moment
horizon
before she
when
spoke.
Yoon-ji entered
The
the
documentary
SJ group building.
isn't about you
Her
pretending
first
to
day
be
had been
something you're not,
challenging,
Seo
but
Jun.
not enough to shake
It's
her
about showing who
determination.
you really are.
She adjusted her
No
blazer
filters, no
and walked
scripts.
down the silent
He let
corridor
out a
toward
short,
Do-hyun's
sarcastic
office.
laugh.
Today,
And you really
she
think
would
the
be
world
ready.
wants to see that?
As she
A
opened the door,
CEO who has
she
no
found the
patience for
CEO
cheap
already seated,
sentimentality?
typing
Nari
something on his
tilted her
laptop.
head,
He didn't
studying
even
him
glance
with a
up when he
perceptive
spoke.
look. Maybe the
Punctuality.
world wants to see
A
the
good
man
start.
behind the armor.
She placed the folder
Seo
of
Jun
documents
clenched
on the
his
desk,
jaw. There
standing
was something
firm.
in those words that
Here are the
bothered him
requested
more than he
reports.
cared to admit.
I've reviewed
Before
every
he could
detail.
respond, one
He
of the
took the
cameramen
folder without
announced that
hurry,
they were ready to
flipping
begin.
through page by
The first
page.
shot was in the
The
employee's
silence
break
was
room.
only filled by the
The
sound
space,
of the pages
usually
turning.
filled with the
Finally,
rigid sound
he
of Seo
closed the
Jun's
document
orders,
and
now
lifted
stood
his eyes
heavy
to her.
with an eerie silence.
Impressive.
He
But you
walked
need
through
to
the
be
room,
more than
feeling
just
the eyes
efficient.
on him.
Yoon-ji.
He knew what they were thinking.
She remained
An
impassive.
unforgiving, impersonal,
And what else do I need
and
to be, Mr.
unreachable
Do-hyun?
boss.
He tapped
Let's
his
try
fingers
something
on the
different.
desk, studying
Nari's
her
voice
for a
cut
long
through the
moment.
air. Instead of
You
just
need to
observing,
understand
how about
that this
interacting?
job is a game.
Ask your
And
employees
in my
what it's
world,
like to work here.
Only the sharpest
Seo Jun
survive.
raised an eyebrow,
She crossed her
clearly
arms and
not
stared
liking
at
the
him,
suggestion.
never breaking eye
But when he
contact.
noticed the challenging
I'm not
expression
naive,
on Nari's
Mr.
face,
Do-hyun. I
something
know this
inside
job
him made him
requires
give
more
in.
than just technical
He
skills.
hesitantly
But
approached
tell
one of
me,
the employees,
is this game
the
you
young
speak
man
of
named
about
Ji
strategy
Hoon,
or
who
manipulation?
kept his gaze lowered.
He smiled.
The camera captured
almost
every
challenging
detail
grin.
of that uncomfortable moment.
Maybe a little bit of both.
What's it like
Who
working here?
knows? You might
Seo
learn the
Jun
difference
asked,
over time.
his voice carrying a
Do-hyun's phone
formal,
rang,
almost robotic
interrupting the
tone.
exchange of glances.
Ji Hoon lifted
He
his
answered
eyes,
briefly,
clearly
ending
surprised
the
by
call
the
with
question.
efficiency of
It
someone
took
who
him a few
always
seconds to
holds
answer.
control.
It's a
Then,
challenging
he looked back at
environment.
Yoon-ji.
He hesitated.
I have an event tonight.
but also very
You'll come with
demanding.
me.
People
She
here
blinked,
work under constant
surprised by
pressure.
the sudden order.
Seo Jun
Is
crossed
this
his
part of my
arms,
duties now?
processing the employee's
He stood
words.
up,
The
adjusting
camera
his
captured
suit
everything.
jacket.
The silence
It's part of the
stretched
game,
until
Yoon-ji.
Nari
I hope you're up
intervened.
to it.
Did you
Night
expect
had
that
fallen
answer?
over Seoul, she asked, and the
Looking
luxurious
directly
event
at
hall
Seo
of the
Jun.
Grand Seoul Hotel
He turned
was
his gaze
illuminated
to the
by
window.
crystal chandeliers.
No, he hadn't
The
expected
business
it.
elite
He'd
gathered
always
there,
assumed that
and
employees were
Do-hyun,
just
as
grateful
always,
to be working in
was
his
the center
company.
of attention.
But there,
Wearing a
in
flawless
front
suit,
of the camera,
he moved through
he
the
realized
guests
there was
with
so much
absolute
he had never
confidence.
bothered to
Beside
see.
him,
Nari
Yoon-ji
reviewed
maintained
the
a
footage from the
professional
previous
demeanor,
day,
holding a
while
discreet
sipping a
folder
strong
with
coffee in a
information
small
about the
editing room
event's
within
key
SJ
participants.
Corporation.
Your goal
Every
tonight
expression
is
of
to
Seo
observe
Jun,
and learn,
every
he said in a
pause,
low tone,
and every fleeting
not taking
glance
his eyes
captured
off
by
the
the
crowd.
cameras were
But I also
meticulously
expect you to know
analyzed.
when to intervene.
She knew he was uncomfortable,
Yoon-ji raised an eyebrow.
but she also knew that
And what
something
would be the
inside
right
him was
moment to
changing.
intervene, Mr.
On the
Do-hyun?
other side of the company,
He glanced at her
Seo
with a
Jun
slight,
stared at the pile of
challenging
reports on
smile.
his desk,
When I
but
need
his
to be
mind was
saved
trapped
from
in the
unwanted
interaction with Ji
conversation.
Hoon.
It
There was
didn't
something
take
in the
long for that
employee's
moment to
response
arrive.
that bothered him.
A foreign investor
It wasn't
was
just the
monopolizing
fact that he
Do-hyun's
admitted
attention,
to working under
insisting on a
pressure,
proposal
but
he
the
had
way
already
he
turned
spoke,
down.
as if it
Yoon-ji,
were a universal
noticing the
truth
discomfort,
within that company.
intervened with
For the first
calculated
time in a
precision. long while, Mr. Seo Jun found himself wondering
for the interruption.
if the image he projected
director of
truly
Sunday
reflected
Corporate
who
is
he
waiting.
was.
Her
The day
voice
went
was
on,
firm.
and new recordings were scheduled.
Ji-hyun smiled
Na-ri entered Seo
Pleased.
Jun's office without
Excuse
waiting
me.
for permission.
He stepped away from
Accustomed to the
investor,
dynamic of the
following
past few
Yoon-ji.
days, he
Once
didn't
they
even
were at a
bother to
safe
fake
distance,
surprise.
He leaned slightly
Today,
toward her.
we're filming
Well
you
done.
outside the
Quick
corporate
and
environment,
precise.
she said,
Yoon-ji
placing the
kept a neutral
documentary
expression.
script on his desk.
I was just doing my
Seo
job,
Jun
sir.
raised his eyes.
The orchestra began to
clearly
play a soft
displeased
tune
with the
background,
idea.
and the guests
Outside
gathered
the
for
corporate
official
environment,
opening of the event.
you want me to pretend to be
Hyun
someone I'm
led
not?
Yoon-ji to a more
Na-ri
secluded
crossed her
area,
arms and
where some
smiled slightly.
influential figures
I want to
were
show who
engaged in
you are
discreet
when you're not
conversations.
surrounded by rules.
This is
and
where the real
numbers.
negotiations
Someone
happen.
beyond the CEO of SJ
Observing a
Corporation.
group that included
Seo Jun
magnates
drummed
and
his fingers on the
politicians.
desk,
Yoon-ji
pondering for a
remained
moment.
alert,
Finally,
mentally registering
he
the
let out a
details.
tired sigh.
What do you expect
And where
me to
exactly
do?
do you
She
want to
asked.
take me?
Just
Na-ri
observe.
smiled.
But don't
To the
underestimate
local
the
market,
presence here.
Seo-jun
They've already
furrowed
caught
his
the
brow.
attention of some people.
Market?
Yoon-ji
What does that have
noticed
to do with the
curious
company?
glances directed
She
at
pulled
him.
up a chair
Some
and
seemed
sat
to be
across from
evaluating
him.
her.
It
While
has to
others
do with the
simply
people who
speculated
work for you.
about her relationship
I want you to
with
see
Doo
how
Hyun.
they live,
What kind
what
of
they
attention,
buy,
she asked,
what they need.
keeping her tone
Your work
professional.
affects the lives of
Doo
many
Hyun
people.
smiled faintly,
But do you know how they
as if
live?
amused by the
He
question.
fell silent for a
The
moment.
kind that can be dangerous.
It was a perspective
if you
he
don't know
had
how
never
to play this
considered
game
before.
correctly.
Later,
The
the
night at
cameras
the Grand
captured
Seoul
Seo-jun
Hotel
walking
continued.
through the market,
But something in
observing
the
stalls
atmosphere
filled
of
with
the
fruits,
seemed to
vegetables,
shift.
and local products.
Yoon-ji felt like
He
she
saw
was
faces
being
he had never
watched.
noticed before.
And for a moment,
Workers,
she had the
merchants,
impression that the job
ordinary
as Doo
people
Hyun's
who in
assistant
some way were
involved
impacted by
much
his
more than
business
just
decisions.
organizing schedules
For the
and
first
managing
time,
documents.
he felt a different
Doo Hyun
discomfort
noticed her expression
that didn't
without
come
looking
from the
away
presence
the
of the
wine
cameras,
glass in his hand.
but from a truth
Said
he had
calmly,
never wanted to
"You
face.
seem nervous."
As he walked,
That doesn't
an
suit me.
elderly vendor
Yoon-ji
approached
took a
him,
deep breath,
holding a basket of
maintaining her
fruit.
composure.
Young man,
I just realized
you seem like a
that this
busy
event
man.
isn't just
Try
about
this
business.
apple.
There's
Sweet
something else
as it
going
should
on
be.
here.
Seo-jun
finally
hesitated
looked at
but
her,
took the fruit.
his gaze
Na-ri, by his
There's
side,
always something
observed
else,
closely.
Yoon-ji.
He took a bite,
The world of big
and to his
business is made
surprise,
up
he
of
smiled
information,
faintly.
power, and secrets.
It's good.
She
he
furrowed
admitted.
her brow
The
slightly,
vendor smiled widely.
realizing her suspicions
That makes me
had
happy.
been right.
We work hard
And
to
what's
offer
your
the
secret,
best.
Mr. Doo Hyun?
Na-ri leaned
He gave a
slightly
half
towards
smile,
Seo-jun
one
and
filled
whispered,
with intention.
"Now ask her
Are you
about
ready
her
to find
day."
out?
He looked
Before
at
she could
Na-ri,
respond,
suspicious,
a man
but
approached.
followed her advice.
He was older.
"And how is your day
impeccably
going
dressed
today?"
in a gray suit.
The woman laughed.
And his gaze was
Difficult,
sharp.
as always.
Doo Hyun,
But it's life.
it's been a while.
If
he
we don't
said.
work, we
His
don't
voice
eat.
laced with almost
And
a
if we don't
challenging
smile,
tone.
we don't live.
Doo Hyun
The
remained
experience at the
impassive.
local market left
Mr.
Seo-jun
Kang,
unsettled.
I thought you'd
For the first
retire.
time in years,
The man let
he had
out a
allowed
dry
himself
chuckle.
to look at the world
Some
outside
men
the
never
windows of
truly
his glass
retire.
office.
We're always
But as
watching.
this sparked a new
Yoon-ji
curiosity,
caught the exchange
it
of
also
glances
brought
and felt that
uncomfortable
something
memories.
much deeper was going on
That
there.
night,
Who was
he
this
stayed
man?
at the company late,
What did he want? with
poring
Doo Hyun?
over financial reports.
You've always played the game
but
well,
his mind
Doo Hyun.
kept wandering.
But even the best players
The
make
face of the
mistakes.
elderly vendor
I hope you know what you're
and her
doing.
simple
Kang threw
words
one last
continued
look
to
at
echo
Yoon-ji
in his
before
head.
walking away.
If we don't smile,
She couldn't help but ask,
we don't live.
What did he mean
He
by
had
that?
never stopped to
Doo
think
Hyun
about
finished
what
his
that
wine
really meant.
and set the glass on the
Na-ri
table
entered the
calmly.
room without knocking.
He's a man who doesn't
Something
like
he had long
surprises.
since stopped
And I'm
trying to
surprised he
correct.
never wanted to face.
Something's changed at you.
Yoon-ji felt a
She
chill
said,
run down her
closing
spine.
the door behind her.
For the first time, she
Seo-jun
realized she
lifted
was
his eyes
involved in
to her
something
but didn't
much
answer
bigger than she
immediately.
imagined.
Is that a problem?
She looked around and
He
noticed
asked
that
with
other
an
people
ironic
seemed to
tone.
be watching them.
Na-ri
too.
smiled,
The event,
leaning
which had
against
once
his
seemed
desk.
like a showcase for business, now
You're
felt
finally
like a
starting to see
chessboard
things from a
where
different
each
angle.
person played a
But there's still something you're
well-calculated
hiding, isn't there?
role. If you don't tell me what's
Seo-jun
going
fell
on,
silent
I
for a
won't be able to
moment,
help
his
you,
gaze
he said,
distant.
keeping her
That
calm
documentary
for
was revealing
Doo
more
Hyun
about
watched
him
her
than he
for a
wanted
moment
to
before
admit.
finally saying,
I grew up in a
Kang
humble
and I have a
neighborhood.
past.
He finally
He used to be
confessed.
one of the most
I spent my
influential
life trying
investors
to
in my
escape the
company,
lack of
but I
resources,
took him out of the
the
game
pressure of
when I
not
found
having
out he
enough.
was manipulating
Maybe that's why I
contracts for
became
his
so
own
obsessed
benefit.
with success.
Now he wants
Na-ri
revenge.
didn't show surprise,
Yoon-ji crossed her
but her
arms.
eyes softened.
And I'm in the middle of this
That's nothing
because
to be ashamed of,
Doo Hyun let
Seo-jun.
out a small sigh.
But you've always thought you had to
Because
hide
you
that
work
part
for
of
me.
you, haven't you?
And Kang knows
He
that
averted
anyone
his
by
gaze.
my side
The image
can
he
be a
had built
target.
over the years never
Yoon-ji's
allowed for
heart
vulnerability.
raced. She
But
never
now,
imagined
sitting in
that
front
by
of
accepting the
Na-ri,
job,
he wondered if it
she
was
would
time
become
to
part
stop
of such a
running from who he
dangerous
truly
game.
was.
The muffled
Na-ri
sound of
pulled
Doo
a chair
Hyun's footsteps
and sat
echoed down
across
the
from him,
silent corridor of
as
the
if
Grand
giving
Seoul
him the
Hotel.
space to
He
continue
walked
speaking.
ahead of Yoon-ji.
You work
His
so
shoulders
hard to
tense,
maintain
as if
this
carrying
impenetrable
an invisible
image.
weight.
But
The
doesn't
encounter
that get
with Kang
exhausting?
had changed the course
She
of
asked,
the evening.
her voice
And
softer now.
a cloud of uncertainty
Seo-jun let
hung
out a
over them.
long sigh,
Yoon-ji
running his
kept
hand
pace,
through his hair.
closely observing
I never
every
thought about
gesture
it.
of Doo Hyun.
I always thought
For
hard
the
work
first
was
time,
the only way.
he didn't seem
And in
as
a way,
impenetrable
I
as
still do.
before.
But
Where are we
lately, I've
going?
been wondering if all
She
of this
asked,
was worth it.
not hiding the suspicion
Na-ri
in
tilted her
voice.
head,
Doo
studying
Hyun
him.
didn't answer immediately.
And what's your answer?
He opened the door to one of the
Seo-jun
hotel's
stayed silent
private
for a
rooms
moment
and
before
gestured
looking
for
at
her
him.
to enter.
His gaze,
Inside,
which had always
the
been
space
filled with
was luxurious
skepticism
but
and
silent.
coldness, now
Only a
held
set
a
of
spark of
armchairs
vulnerability.
and an elegant
I still
bar
don't
filled the
know.
room.
The
"We
Seethy
need to
day
talk,"
broke with a
he
cloudy
finally said,
sky,
closing
reflecting
the
the
door behind
uncertainty in Seo
Yoon-ji
Jun's heart.
crossed her arms.
He stood before the massive
what?
windows of his office,
About the fact that I'm in
gazing
the middle
at the
of
city
something you didn't
below.
tell me?
His
Or
empire,
about Kang and this
his
silent war
identity,
between you two?
everything he had
Do
built
Hyun
over
let
the
out a
years
tired
now
sigh
seemed like a mirror
and
of
ran his
himself,
hand through his hair.
imposing on the
Kang wants
outside,
to destroy
but
everything
hollow
I've
within.
built. And now that he
Nari
knows you're
entered
by
the
my
room
side,
with steady steps,
you've become
holding an
important
envelope.
piece in this
She
game.
closed the door behind
Yoon-ji
her
felt a
and
chill
observed
run
him for
down
a
her
moment
spine.
before speaking.
And I
The
never asked to
documentary
be
is
part of
ready.
this.
Her voice was
Hyun
firm,
lifted his gaze
but there was a
to hers.
softness in it,
His eyes filled
a
with
touch of something
she
Seo
couldn't
Jun
decipher.
couldn't name.
I know.
He turned
But
slowly,
now that you
meeting
are,
her gaze.
You need to
There was an
decide whether you
unspoken
want
question
to leave
between them.
or whether you'll
What are
stay
you going to
by
do
my
now?
side.
He finally
Yoon-ji
asked.
looked away.
Nari gave a
absorbing
small
his
smile.
words.
but it was melancholic.
Was not small.
My part in this
Do-hyun
is
represented
done.
a world of
Now it's up
secrets,
to you to
manipulation,
decide what
and
to do
dangers
with all of this.
She never imagined
Seo-jun took the envelope from her hands, but didn't open it.
What exactly
He
does
simply
that mean?
observed her,
She
realizing
asked.
this might be
Her
the
voice
last time he
quieter
saw
now.
her. The silence
Do-hyun
between
walked over
them
to the
seemed
bar
heavier than
and
any
poured himself
words.
a glass of
The
whiskey.
documentary had
He
changed
swirled the
many
liquid in
things,
the glass
but the
before
biggest
answering.
question remained.
It means you'll
What
need
did
to
the
trust
future
me,
hold for them?
that you may
If
become
it's a
target,
goodbye,
that
he
your
took a
life
deep
may
breath,
never be the same.
diverting his gaze to the window once more.
suppressed a shiver.
Maybe it's
Why
better
did he
this
seem
way,
so calm
he said,
when talking
trying
about
to hide the
something so
pain in
grave?
his voice.
And if I
Nari
leave,
nodded,
she questioned,
fighting the urge to say
Young
more.
placed the glass
But she
on
knew
the
some
table,
stories end like
his
this.
eyes locking onto
Incomplete
hers.
but true.
I'll
She
guarantee
gave
your
one
safety,
last look at
but you'll
Seo-jun
never
before
get
leaving,
close to this world
leaving
again.
only the
Never again
silence
to me.
and the cold
The
city
silence
outside.
fell over the room.
He
like a
remained
heavy
there
curtain.
for long
Yoon-ji
minutes,
felt her heart race
holding the
with his
envelope
response.
but lacking the courage.